Welcome back to GMP Scenario, presented by PharmaContentLabs.com, where we break down common GMP mistakes, inspection risks, and the small control gaps that turn into big observations.
Okay, so let's jump right in. I want you to picture a scene that probably sounds a little too familiar if you work in regulated manufacturing. You've just wrapped up your cleaning validation. The report lands on your desk, and the results? They look great. Everything is well within the limits. It is a clear, undeniable pass. It feels like a huge success, right? But what if that success was actually a ticking time bomb, setting you up for a massive failure down the road?
So here's how the story usually plays out. First, that validation report comes back showing everything passed, you've got a clean bill of health. Check. Next, QA signs off on it, gives their approval, the green light is on. So of course, routine production kicks back into gear, just as planned. And then, bam, it happens. A batch fails because of some unexpected impurity, and the entire production line grinds to a halt.
And this right here is the central mystery we're going to unravel in this explainer. How on earth did a process that had a passing validation report end up causing a failed batch? Well, here's a hint. The problem wasn't the result itself. It was in the design of the test that gave you that result in the first place.
Yeah, this is what I call the passing fallacy. It's this incredibly dangerous idea that a passing score automatically means your process is safe and effective. But when you start to peel back the layers, you find out that the root cause isn't just bad luck, it's a deeply flawed system that was pretty much designed to fail from the very beginning.
So what exactly went wrong here? Well, the first big root cause is a weak, worst-case selection. This means the validation was basically designed to test an easy-to-pass scenario, not the most challenging one you'd actually face. You know, it's kind of like training for a marathon by only jogging downhill. Sure, you're going to get a fantastic time, but it proves absolutely nothing about whether you're ready for the real race.
The second critical flaw? Oh, this one's a classic. Choosing where to take your samples based on what's convenient, not on where the actual risk is. So, swabs are taken from these super easy to reach, simple to clean surfaces, and they completely ignore the tough spots, the nooks and crannies where contamination is most likely to hide. This isn't about finding risk, it's about actively avoiding it.
And the final nail in the coffin, this one's a big one, is missing or just plain outdated recovery studies. Now, what's really wild about this is that it means the team had zero proof that their sampling method, the swab or the rinse itself, could even find the contaminant if it was there. They were basically looking for something in a dark room without ever checking to see if their flashlight had batteries.
So this all boils down to one absolutely crucial point, and it's really the core thesis of our whole discussion. If the fundamental design of your cleaning validation is weak, then getting a pass is totally meaningless. It doesn't prove you have control over contamination, it just proves you can pass your own flawed test.
And let's be crystal clear about this. Under good manufacturing practices, the expectation isn't just to pass a test, it's to have a robust system that is designed to protect patients. What we've just described, this whole successful failure thing, that's not some gray area. It is an outright compliance failure that creates real risk for the product and, most importantly, for the patient.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem. Now what? How do we actually fix it? Well, the good news is that building a bulletproof system isn't some kind of magic. It's all about a disciplined, scientific approach. So let's pivot to the three-step fix and see how you can build a program that's truly robust.
It really comes down to these three pillars for a validation system that actually works. First, you have to scientifically, and I mean scientifically, define your true worst-case scenario. Second, you have got to validate your sampling and recovery methods to prove that they're effective. And third, you need to implement routine monitoring and change control to keep the whole system alive and up to date.
So for that first step, defining your worst case isn't just a guess, it's a full-on scientific evaluation. You have to look at hard factors like the compound's toxicity, its solubility, which is basically just a fancy way of saying how hard is this stuff to clean, its potency, the batch size, and even the complexity of the equipment surfaces. Only by weighing all of these factors can you really pinpoint the greatest challenge to your cleaning process.
Then we get to step 2, and this is a big one. You've got to prove your methods actually work. This means doing controlled recovery studies for your swabs and rinses. You literally apply a known amount of residue to a surface on purpose, and then you see what percentage your sampling method is able to recover. If you don't have this data, you're just guessing, plain and simple.
And finally, step 3. This is all about remembering that validation is not a one-and-done event. It's a living, breathing system. So every time a new product gets introduced, or a process changes, or new equipment is installed, your change control system absolutely must trigger a reevaluation of your cleaning validation to make sure it's still doing its job.
All right, now I want you to switch hats with me for a minute. To build a system that really holds up under scrutiny, you need to stop thinking like someone who's just trying to pass a test. You need to start thinking like the person giving the test, the inspector. This is about being ready for the real challenge.
And this right here, this is the single biggest mindset shift you need to make. The wrong move, and honestly, the most common one, is designing your sampling plan with the goal of getting a passing result. The right move is to design your plan with the aggressive goal of finding contamination if it exists. You're not just checking a box, you are actively hunting for risk.
Imagine an inspector is standing right in front of you. They're going to go straight for the heart of your plan with a simple question. So, why did you choose these specific sampling locations? If your answer is anything like, well, they were easy to get to, you have already failed the inspection.
And they're not going to stop there. Next, they'll point right at your acceptance criteria and ask, why these limits? They're going to want to see a documented scientific reason based on things like toxicity, dose, and patient safety, not just some arbitrary numbers you picked because you knew you could meet them.
And finally, they're going to land the knockout blow. They'll say, okay, so you're telling me your results are clean. Where is the proof that your sampling method can even find the residue? Show me the data. And if you don't have current, solid recovery studies ready to go, your entire validation just crumbles right there on the spot.
So, after all the science, all the regulations, all the methodology, what does this really come down to? It's about looking beyond the simple pass-fail scorecard and truly understanding what our ultimate responsibility is.
Because when you strip everything else away, you're left with this one simple, fundamental truth. Cleaning validation is not a bureaucratic hurdle. It's not just a box-ticking exercise for compliance. It is a critical system of patient safety protection. It is one of the most important firewalls we have to prevent people from getting hurt.
And so we're going to end with this one question. A question I want you to take back to your own teams and your own processes. Look at your system with fresh eyes and ask yourself, honestly, is your validation simply designed to pass an internal test? Or is it truly and robustly designed to protect the patient? Because the answer to that question makes all the difference in the world.
If this helped, like and subscribe.